Viksit Bharat happens because you and I worked for it. And what is the working formula for it? The working formula is skilling, and skilling as a national agenda and a national priority, and bringing it inside the school at a very, very young age, and bring social reputation and social value for skilling. I think nations will be more secure if they behave that they're going to be at war very soon. Similarly, nations will be safer if they imagine that they're going to have an epidemic or an endemic like kind of situation. I think the responsibility on carbon footprint is individual now. We cannot say that as a house, we are doing, who is doing what, we don't know. I think we can reduce it to and track it to an individual level as well, and bring in that kind of sense of responsibility as well. So if it works at home, it can work in office as well. If it works in office, it can work in the society.
This podcast is in association with the 10th edition of the Bangalore Business Literature Festival 2024. It is India's most attended and longest running business literature festival. The BizLit Fest celebrates and fosters the culture of reading, writing, and publishing business literature. Join us as we bring you heart-to-heart conversations with our esteemed authors and business leaders to inspire you with their insights and also maybe write your own book. Hi, in today's episode, we have with us Sudhakar Rao, an accomplished brand strategist, author, and startup mentor. He made significant contributions in the fields of branding, marketing, corporate relations, and international operations. With over 20 years of experience, he has successfully launched and nurtured brands across sectors such as textiles, food, and education. Sudhakar also has received the prestigious C.K. Prahlad Chair Award for Marketing in 2024. As a keynote speaker at national and international forums, he shares insights on innovation, technology, entrepreneurship, diversity, and inclusiveness. So let us welcome Sudhakar in today's episode. And just to again tell everybody, he's the Director of Branding, ICFA Group. And the book that we're going to talk about today is Wise Views, Lessons from the Game Changers. Welcome, Sudhakar, in today's episode.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohua, for inviting me.
So, Sudhakar, the first question that comes to me is that you're an accomplished brand strategist, author, startup mentor, a social media advisor. How do you manage to keep that so many hats fixed together, on the hat without it shifting anywhere? And how did you manage all of these together for you to go in depth into research in seemingly very orthogonal topics, And from where did this entire idea of writing the book Wise Views came into the picture? How did it all start? What was the motivation to shape your book like an anthology of leadership conversational stories, which I think people are going to find very interesting the minute it's conversational, because one feels very connected. The minute it's more colloquial, it's more conversational. So tell me the entire journey, Sudhakar.
Yeah, thank you once again for this wonderful question. That's a little more personal in the sense that the focus is on me. In terms of the fact that we are able to do this depends on the kind of lens that you look through all the time. By virtue of my functional responsibility, by virtue of my erudition, I think I'm trained to look at these things in a storytelling manner. Whenever I look at any of these hats that you talked about, I focus on storytelling, what kind of story that we can pick up and then connect from one incident and one event to another. So it's a question of interconnectedness of insights that I use as a common thread when I actually navigate from one hat to another, as you have mentioned. Broadly, my journey has been pretty interesting, and some of my friends tell me that this is something which I really like, in the sense that passion, my own passion is the job here. So that's what my friends who are very close to me, they often have mentioned. So the role that I play and the kind of responsibilities that I undertake as part of my functional responsibility are seen as an alignment with my passion as an individual. So if I have to translate that, it is storytelling and picking the insights from one to another. For example, when we dive deep into certain inputs for research, when we look at startups, when we look at social media, when we look at building brands, I think there is a common ground everywhere. And that common ground is to identify some kind of storytelling. For example, if you have to work on a fundamental pitch for the new business or a new startup, I think that's the key. That's the value proposition one has to work on. I think value proposition is one, and how do you convey that value proposition is another thing. I think that's where I have more often helped some of these young entrepreneurs to work on. Similarly, when we move to social media, I think individually people will have to look into themselves, into their own organizations, and pick up some kind of authentic stories. And these stories actually often flow from the kind of work that they do day in and day out. But sometimes, because of the milieu of the work, they miss the finer points, and they also miss that there's a story around which they're working. My job probably has been to identify that story and stitch it together and help them. So it's an insight plus story, and story connected to the kind of requirement that they will have to work on, whether it is a startup, whether it is brand building, whether it is social media, so on and so forth. So I've been enjoying this by staying focused on storytelling. Thank you.
How amazing. I mean, we are all storytellers. That's why I think we both are also talking to each other. And storytelling came very late to me in life. I did not even realize I didn't even have a word actually for it, which I later kind of coined together that this whole idea of branding is actually storytelling. So, your book has actually insights from different management gurus, corporate leaders, veteran industrialists, social entrepreneurs, startup anchors, leaders, sports, arts. What is it that you would say in common is the common denominator that you see that drives professionals across various spectrums that you've covered? There would be, like you said just now, that passion is one thing, and I completely believe in it, that unless you're passionate, it won't come through, with the work that you do. So, what according to you would be this common trait that you found among all of these people that you've, written about?
That's very interesting. I was waiting for someone to ask me this very important aspect. You know, across all the leaders who come from various walks of life, see, some of them are commercial entrepreneurs, business entrepreneurs. Some of them are social entrepreneurs. Some of them have influenced life in intangible methods and means. We have looked at and spoken to many of these leaders who come from transcendental meditation, to a cyclist, to a hardcore finance specialist who has built a business, someone to a traditional business like agarbattis or biryanis. So, across all these leaders, the common denominator has been two aspects. One is empathy in leadership. The individual has championed and displayed empathy, and therefore the individual has been very effective. There's a lesson there. The second aspect has been resilience. Resilience is to, adopt, pivot, and, depending on the difficulties and the challenges that you face, it's not that you're not going to fall, but it is the ability to rise when you fall, and then pivot it and try and see when apparently there is no end, you hit a roadblock. That's the end of the world apparently, but at that time you kind of pivot it and use the other side of the wall, that is the sky, or that is the roof that you have, to actually work on. It is easier to summarize now, but when you're actually going through some of those stories, when we are in conversation with these leaders, what I personally perceive is that the joy of, pivoting, the joy of, rising again after falling, and when everything else was closed, how did they, blaze out a new path? I think these were the common things that I picked up from so many leaders, irrespective of the domain that they hail from, have been pretty useful. And my summary is that resilience and empathy, this is the common denominator.
Yeah, empathy is something I think is just now that people are talking about. It's a word that I is very new to our dictionary also, and it's fantastic that when you say this, because it just reiterates my belief that without empathy you will never be able to lead a team. Because without understanding what your people who are there, staking their entire lives, are going to follow you unless you have the compassion and the kindness to understand their stories. So it's amazing what you've said just now, Sudhakar. But let's just talk a little bit
One
about.
second.
Yeah.
1 second. I just want to give you my 2 cents on empathy. And I personally practice this. I think everyone will have to practice this. Let me be a little bit of preachy in this area. See, empathy is the ability or the willingness to put yourself in others' shoes.
Yes.
And more in terms of business, more in terms of personal effectiveness, it is useful. For example, you're dealing with huge set of customers. Unless and until you put yourself in the shoes of the customers, you're not going to empathize with their pain points. And if you're not going to empathize with their pain points, how are you going to come up with any solutions? So it doesn't make any business sense if you're not empathetic. So it begins with empathy. The other kind of empathy that we are talking about is to lend a helping hand or see the pain point of your employees, or in society non-business circumstances generally empathy is seen, but that's not the beginning or the end of it. It has to begin as a business imperative according to me, and it's not just a feel good factor. Just for certain social parameters you're going to be empathetic and you want to display empathy. No, I think empathy is something that you'll have to make as part of your culture. For example, the top individual is empathetic and displays regularly, and all actions follow through on empathy kind of a framework. Then the rest of the leaders in the team, the entire pipeline will also follow, and then it becomes a culture templating for the organization. And therefore, that organization is more likely to be effective in its operations and in its success if it is empathetic as an organizational culture. Otherwise, what happens is you may have functional skills, you will have a lot of competency, you'll have technology, you'll have all the important P's working for you in the marketplace as given in any textbook. But when empathy is missing, you will be seen as someone who is uh, who is actually rushing through behind a given set of numbers one has to follow. At the same time, uh, you are not leaving that strong bonding with the people that you connect day in and day out. They could be internal customers, they could be external customers, but you're not leaving any impact. I think empathy will help you look at that unseen dimension generally because of the kind of busy schedules that all leaders go through. And not only that, if a pipeline is built, if the entire culture is templated accordingly, I think those organizations will last longer. There are several examples. I'm not going to take those examples now, but this is the takeaway. One is the empathy, and the other one is, of course, resilience.
You've said golden words, Sudhakar. I don't know how much of it really business leaders follow this, but definitely it would be a wonderful working environment if business leaders do take on empathy of not just their customers, also the employees that work with you, because then you create a team that will stand with you come what may. And yeah, these were the absolutely golden words, and I think that India is still far away from all of this, because I think mainly as a society we've been about how much you've been able to earn, what has been the profits, without really looking at the pain points within the employees. And once that is done, you have employees who are going to be there with you through thick and thin. uh, so let's just talk a little bit about India has so many emerging business models and opportunities. You've called out trends on hyper local commerce, electric vehicles, and emergence of a new customer set which is prioritizing convenience over cost. So I need you to tell me a little bit about what you mean by convenience over cost, and how do you see these new models really panning out in the tier 2 and 3 parts of our country. And we know that there is a very large populace out there. And I also know that there are many industries who do phenomenally well in the tier 2 and 3 cities, which we don't talk about. And we feel that everything in our country is only in Delhi, Bombay, Chennai, Bangalore, Ahmedabad, and the rest of the places, which isn't true at all. So I want to know from you a little bit about what do you mean by convenience over cost? What are these new business models and opportunities? And let's talk a lot about tier 2 and tier 3 cities. It's personally a very favorite space for me, because I do believe that there's humongous potential in our country in parts that have not yet been touched by many large corporates.
Yes, Mawa, I think that's where our heart should lie. India is an enigma as I see it, and as I've learned from several leaders. India is an enigma. One wonders how it runs without actually not being done very actively, consciously to govern and monitor it. Of course, there is set of rules, there is governance, there is systems, law and order, so on and so forth. But it runs in spite of it, or in addition to that, it runs very smoothly, and therefore it's an enigma. The second aspect is, Mawa, that is very close to my heart, is that there are many Indias within India. There are multiple Indias within India. And the moment we recognize this fact, then we will come out of one size fits all, one solution fits all, put the formula, get the marks kind of mindsets that some of us have grown up with. I think that's been the education system, and therefore, one gets standardized in their thinking. Therefore, multiple Indias will tell you how diversified this country is and how challenging it is. And at the same time, as a marketer, you can also understand and empathize with what I'm trying to emote here, that it is beautiful to connect to so many different micro segments within the diversified country that we have. You take any particular state, you will still have micro segments. That's the second point. Third point is that the tier 2 and tier 3 is the driver of growth for this country. A lot of visibility happens in the tier 1 cities, that is the metros, but in tier 2 and tier 3, you have the entire drama happening. The economy is being shaped. Not just the economy, when I said drama, some of the overriding images and the emotions are championed by the tier 2 and tier 3 cities. For example, politically speaking, I'll just make a small mention of it, and then we don't have to delve into it so much. If there is an overriding impression of a given government in any particular state or even the central government, the first one to respond with a decisive mandate, with a decisive response in their voting preferences, is the tier 2 and tier 3 cities and not the urban ones. I'm not even talking about the percentage of polling. Percentage of polling anyway in urban centers is very, very poor, less than 40%. Whereas in tier 2 and tier 3 cities or towns, you have the polling percentages pretty high, as high as 75 to 80%. The minimum has been 65%, and now the maximum has been 85%, which means that they are the people who drive the shape and the destiny of this country, because they come out and decisively speak for or against any particular set image and impression that is at this time prevailing in the country. Now, going away from there, we talk about businesses, the hyperlocal commerce, the electric vehicles. These are actually catching up amazingly well. There are surveys after surveys that are giving these figures, which amount to conclude one important fact, that is the high penetration of internet, mobile usage being pretty high, and the cost of access of internet coming very low. The mobile commerce is going faster, so people are choosing their lifestyles and consumption of various items, the food and non-food items that they are consuming, at the tip of their fingers through the mobile commerce. And therefore it makes sense to invest more and delve deeper into the hyperlocal commerce, electric vehicles, and business like that, because the tier 2 and tier 3 are highly tech savvy now. Gone are the
Yeah.
days where some of us who reside in metros uh, kept on thinking so wrongfully that it has been a bastion of metros if you have to really use some of the latest apps and the technologies. But it's not true. The truth lies in the way the technology per se is consumed by tier 2 and tier 3 folks. And these are large percentages, as you mentioned. More than 65% of people are residing in these tier 2, tier 3 cities and towns. And they are shaping the outcome and the destiny of our businesses. Apart from the earlier ones, which I mentioned, in terms of the political outcomes, in terms of the destiny of the country, in terms of mirroring the mood of how the country actually is thinking. It has happened in my state where I reside. It has happened in various other states in the recent elections also. They have given you indicators, they have given you pointers. They have told you that fortune lies at the bottom of the pyramid. The great C.K. Prahlad, you mentioned in my introduction that I received the award. He championed this business thought that there is fortune at the bottom of the pyramid, and the bottom of the pyramid is beautifully captured within tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities and towns in this country. So I think all of us will have to be motivated. I think it makes business sense also to stay focused on tier 2 and tier 3 and pick up insights from there and probably apply it elsewhere.
I completely agree with you. I think because a lot of us really live with this whole city snobbery. And we believe that we are in this little island where there's nothing that exists beyond this. And every time with my work that I've traveled into the tier 2 and tier 3 cities, I'm shocked with the way the UPI, works, the way I can just do all online payments. And they shock me when I turn around and ask them, आप cash लोगे नहीं, आपके पास UPI नहीं है, they will ask me. So, I have been humbled myself because my work also takes me into many of these, tier 2 and tier 3 cities. And of course, the warmth of the people is also, I think, representative of the country that we are from, India. And I know I'm probably digressing, but, I remember that I was in Rajasthan and I was going through one of these areas and it was lunchtime. And this lady insisted that I eat lunch with her and I go. And this is not something that you will find in a city. And yeah, so I do believe exactly like you that the success is really at the bottom of the pyramid. You have spoken really to my heart, Sudhakar. So, what would be the advice that you would give to young Indian entrepreneurs, on your perspective on how to deal with failure? Because failure is not something that any one of us are really, we don't envisage when we start something. And failure really sometimes, like you spoke about resilience in the beginning, everybody may not be able to delve into that resilience. It's taken me very long to realize that all my failures were really my guru moments. And when I say guru moments, they were the moments of really being enlightened that this is what I need to learn from it. But it isn't easy all the time, Sudhakar. So what would you tell entrepreneurs who've like probably invested their entire money into something and that has not worked out? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I deal with a lot of young entrepreneurs, especially those who are fresh out of their college, and some of them who are probably 10 years into their business as well. To all of them, I hold out a statistic, and that is well widely published, and it talks about why startups fail. A large percentage of startups fail for a couple of reasons. One of them is that the team is not okay, it's not cohesive. That's one of the reasons. Second reason is they're not attempting to actually solve a real problem. They're barking up the wrong tree. They have not identified a real problem to be solved. They have identified a problem, but that's not the real problem to be solved. That's the reason I said they're barking up the wrong tree. During college days, you are bullish on ideas and idea generation, and it is far more romantic to have a startup done for yourself. It's all good for me, but when you translate that into action, you will have to cross check many things and tick lots of boxes before you hit the ground. So I tell these guys where when rubber hits the road and when they fall flat, when they come back with the nose bludgeoned, I tell them that, hey, our story was not okay. The problem that we were trying to solve was not even communicated properly. And within ourselves, among the four of us, among the four youngsters that they have come together, they have not actually agreed upon it. They were very busy with building the stack, excessive focus on technology, because someone has graduated from an IIT or a similar tech institution. Someone has graduated from a business school, an IIM or someone. They are overly focusing on their vertical, their functional responsibility, and missing the bigger picture. For the sake of coming together, they have come. So my first takeaway or answer to them is that try and hit upon a real market problem that you want to solve. Okay, that's the first one. It's not equivalent to idea. Idea has to be nurtured, verified, looked into. It should be temporarily taken out for cross checking. It's called testing. You have to do all those things and come back and then tell the world that you have this problem and therefore this solution. So the problem is important. Second is that they tend to have one man armies or one woman armies. Okay, I think that is not going to work. When you have advisors and mentors, some of them can have mentors like me. I do pro bono, and at an appropriate time I change my terms, but largely it's pro bono. And these youngsters don't take pro bono very seriously, but they want someone. At least they recognize the fact that they want someone senior to advise them. They need to have advisors, they need to have mentors, they need to have a network of people who can raise funds for them. All this is good, but it begins with the story, the pitch, the value proposition. That has to be very carefully looked into with a microscope, and someone has to rub shoulders with them and help. You need that kind of person at zero level. I think that's where I have shouldered a lot of responsibility and helped a few startups. So have your advisors and network. That's the second one. Third one is resilience. As you have also picked up and mentioned, resilience. They are bound to fail. I might sound a little pessimistic, but based on experience, I want to say it out to them that you will fail. So they ask me a question again. You're here to tell us that we are fail proof. No, I'm not here fail proof. Your four of us plus me is five. All five of us will fail. And a high five to you. I say this to them many a time because we are bound to fail. Let's learn from there. Let's try and rise. Let's display resilience, and let's also capture the collective emotional capital of all your team players and see how all of us can, dirt off our shirt and then rise up and play a game. That's where is the fact. It is more certain that you will fail than it is more certain that you will succeed. So this is what I tell them. If I don't tell them this very important fact, who else will tell them? So that's my responsibility. I want to be their devil's advocate. I want to be their shocker. I want to be their shock absorber at the same time. Induce shock at one end and go to the other end and absorb it. Try and see if we can build robust mindsets. And that's what young entrepreneurs will have to be going forward, where it is off the ground, where it is 2 years into the game. I'm sure they're not going to look back because they don't need anyone like me. They would need a different kind of a mentor at that stage, someone who wears a different kind of a hat. So it is important that within the stage zero and stage one, the early stages, we try and build robust mindsets so that the four of them, the initial founders, become extremely robust and they become resilient and they build teams that become resilient, and then success comes to them because they are brave. So that's my formula for the youngsters.
Wonderful, Sudhakar, what you said. To have the courage to face failure is so important, and very, very important to have mentors. It isn't easy to find a mentor, and once you find them, you need to be ready to listen to the insights that people like you give. So let's just talk a little bit about the Mahabharata, which has many management lessons. And my late father always told me that before you start anything in life, listen to the conversations of between Arjuna and Krishna and learn about ego. And I didn't really take to that very seriously at that time. But then over time, and as much as I'm aging, I do realize that there are many pointers to strategic thinking, complex decision making, which is very, very tough, and the strong interplay with game theory. So, what would be the key lessons and pathways for professionals to learn from your perspective, keeping the Mahabharata, as a management lesson book for all of our listeners right now?
Amazing, amazing. You hit upon a fantastic chapter of my book. Mahabharata has been a favorite mainstay in our culture. Okay, that's why it's called epic. Now, what do we learn from Mahabharata? There are several lessons. Of course, it's an amazing treatise for decision making, leadership, team building, navigating the challenges, weathering the storms, so on and so forth. I mean, there are several instances beautifully captured and portrayed in the entire Mahabharata. But what are the lessons for us in our day-to-day work? There are probably many, but let me take one or two or three. The first one, and it personally aligns with me, and therefore I have picked this up, is empathetic leadership. An empath who is a leader will be very, very effective. Yudhishthira has mentioned this in several of his sayings within Mahabharata, that empathetic leadership is extremely important. If you don't have empathy, I think you will not be seen as someone who is very serious. In our own organizations, we have seen several leaders coming and going, several CEOs and managing directors, several uh, entrepreneurs who have established organizations. they're taken very seriously if empathy is worn on their sleeve. If empathy is a day-to-day parameter, is empathy is an ingrained habit of a leader. So empathy is number one. Number two, how do you take calculated risks? And when I say calculated risks, it actually defines entrepreneurship in one way or intrapreneurship in another way. What is entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurship is two parameters: risk taking and ownership. Whether you work for yourself or you work for someone else, take risks and also take ownership for the risk that you have taken. That's it. It's in simple language, according to me, is entrepreneurship. When Mahabharata tells you how you can take calculated risks, how Arjuna is told by Krishna to take calculated risks, exposing the vast field of risk, and on the other side, keeping Arjuna abreast with the potential benefits of doing it. How empathy will win over a few let goes that one has to concede if one may have to tread that path. And there's a question of what is called trading off. And that is, in simple language, is calculated risk. And calculated risk epitomizes the personality of an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur in modern day discussions that we are having. So this is so beautiful in our Mahabharata that I often tell people that we need to focus on empathy. We also need to focus on calculated risks. And the other thing is how long-term impact should be a priority over short-term gains. Several times we are wooed or we are compelled to click on short-term gains. When I say click on short-term gains, it's easier to select a short-term gain, a short-term benefit that you see as visible. But long-term impact is something which is not immediately visible, and therefore you wouldn't go for it. But a true visionary and a true leader and a true business entrepreneur in our parlances now will have to look at a long-term impact. Today, if you get a benefit of visibility when you advertise, say, on the back of an auto rickshaw, would you like to do? Does it align with your brand? Would you like to advertise inside the urinal of a multiplex theater complex just because it's visible? What is the alignment with your brand? These are all short term. If someone gives you a very, very cheap rate to advertise and deal with combo offers, for example, you will be besorted with another brand which is dealing with another product and another category, but it doesn't align with the values that your current brand is epitomizing. For example, you're in education. You can't advertise on the back of a auto rickshaw. You can't advertise in the urinals of your multiplex cinema theaters. You can't advertise along with an alcohol brand or a cigarette brand. So, what is the short term benefit? The short term monetary benefit should be overlooked, and we should be able to have the far-sightedness of a long term benefit of preserving our brand values, preserving our alignment, and see that this organization will stay afloat and do extremely well, maybe if we cross the initial few hurdles. I think the temptations of falling for short term benefits will always be there, like in Mahabharata. It will be there in our everyday Bharata. And I think we need to rise over these things and learn from this epic and apply to our work as well as life. Even at home, I think with our friends also, the way we pick up these three qualities and actualize it and display it in our behavior, then that defines our personality. I mean, I keep saying these things from a brand building perspective for an individual, but these are extremely useful for an organization as well. How an organization behaves, just because I have an opportunity of accepting, say, we are into educational institutions. We have an opportunity of accepting a large number of students even without the qualifying mark, just because we get a huge influx of revenue. What is going to happen when they graduate? What is going to happen not just when they graduate, but after graduation? What is the kind of work they're going to do in the society or the kind of damage that they're going to inflict on the society? We are directly responsible for the kind of students we are graduating and giving it for the society. Are we responsible? We have to be responsible. Okay, we have taken students. Are we shaping them very well at IC5? We have to shape them extremely well. And then we have to make sure that they are responsible citizens. They are also socially responsible. They become good individuals. They become good husbands and wives, fathers and mothers, apart from becoming good engineers and doctors and lawyers and so on and so forth. I think I started with nation, I started with society, then family, and then the individual or your business. If a business takes this kind of responsibility for their actions and not succumb to the short term benefits that one usually encounters, then I think the lesson from Mahabharata will help us travel quite far.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, Sudhakar, you've also dealt with the China story in your book. India as a society is very different. So, therefore, what can India as a nation, which is on its path of very robust decade of growth, what can we learn from China's successes and mistakes, of course, that they have experienced in their entire hyper growth phase? So, like all countries, when they are really rising, there are many things that they do which can really cost a nation very badly. So, what do you think India can imbibe?
Okay, this is a very interesting question, and my take is that India has missed the bus that China has taken in terms of skill building, in terms of skilling as a national priority. That has not happened for us, and we missed the bus. That's where it is 1-0 in favor of China. And the result is over the last 2.5 to 3 decades, they have gone far ahead in terms of building a strong muscle for manufacturing and thus a strong muscle for their economy. But China also has missed their bus. And that's where it is 0-1 in favor of India. That is democracy. Democracy gives you a large openness, stress reliever kind of a social fabric within this country. And based on the canvas of democracy, we should do upskilling and robust skilling right from very, very young age. Skilling as a national problem and skilling as a national solution, we have to focus on it and put these two things together. That is, on the backdrop of democracy, we will have skilling as everybody's business. We need to get into that kind of thing. Technological skilling, skilling of dealing with people, skilling on manufacturing, skilling on emerging technologies. I think India has got a lot of knowledge capital, and we need to translate that into skill capital. Once we do that with infrastructure is also available right now. I mean to say, the apparatus, the policy infrastructure, the digital infrastructure is available now. But we need to make it a national priority. It should not be like an election cry. It should not be like a war cry during elections and then we forget about it. So the National Skill Development Corporation has not really worked very well in this country. I think many people have pocketed money that has been budgeted for NSDCs, and it has been seen as a revenue earning thing for your favorite people in various locations in the country. I think we need to pivot that. We need to make sure that skilling is integrated as part of the school curriculum and we take it as a step up and we take it with pride. We need to learn from Germany. I think apart from our international relations that we have with Russia, I think we need to also have a very robust skilling policy initiatives and partnerships with Germany so that we learn a leaf or several leaves out of their book, and that will be the source of growth for our country in the next a decade or 2 decades to come. Why I'm saying this? Because uh, if you want to be a developed country, if you want to be a Viksit Bharat, it will not happen just because there is a nice slogan and you put a lot of money in advertising it. Every time we open our mobile, you look at any kiosk, you say Viksit Bharat. But Viksit Bharat doesn't happen just because you and I wished for it. Viksit Bharat happens because you and I worked for it. And what is the working formula for it? The working formula is skilling as a national agenda and a national priority and bringing it inside the school at a very, very young age and bring social reputation and social value for skilling. We look down upon those skills or skill sets that the paramedical forces learn and pick up, and they save several lives. We look down upon it. We think that it is a low value job. Social value that we assign for these skills is pretty low. We think that he was not successful in becoming a doctor and therefore he has become a skilled paramedical person. Isn't that a travesty of fate for us? It is. I think we need to collectively, socially change the perception of the skilling and the avenues that are generated because of the skilling. And apart from that, the moment you integrate into the school curriculum, then automatically it is respected. Best of the schools in this town, some of the best schools, I don't want to name them, if they imbibe by picking up a lesson or two from the national education policy, the new education policy, if they imbibe it and advertise on the skilling. You don't advertise on your playgrounds, you don't advertise on your wonderful infrastructure, air conditioned rooms and air conditioned bus that you provide, but you advertise on the skills that you are going to build at school level. Then it becomes socially acceptable and socially the value will go up. For example, I will pursue a job which my uncles and aunts and relatives think that I'm doing something really good. That's called social perception, social reputation about my own job. So, parental acceptance, relatives' acceptance is equal to social acceptance and social value being assigned onto a particular job. If gymnastics is not a socially respectable kind of a phenomenon, how will we win gold medals in Olympics? We will not. As a nation, we'll have to assign the values, we have to rejig our mindsets, and that has to happen when institutions come forward. The governments will come forward, definitely, but the institutions will have to pick it up and not succumb to, which I was talking about, the short term benefits. We have to focus on the long term gain and the long term impact that the country can make. Therefore, skilling has to be a national priority, and we need to focus on that. Why we are saying this? If your gross enrollment ratio in the higher education is not above 65%, you will not be a developed country. If your per capita income is not $3,000 and more, it will not be a developed, not 12,000. Currently it is 3,000. It should be 12,000 and more. It will not be a developed country. I think we are way below what China is currently. And therefore, how are we going to rise, beat China and be a developed country for ourselves first? It's not a show of optics to beat someone who is not living in our country. It is for the members who are living in the country that our translation of developed country means improving their per capita income. And all these things will happen when skilling as an important aspect that we pick up from what China has focused on. And of course, we should let the society have its own stress busters. Literature, art, science, music, uh, all these things will have to be championed and upheld. And I think India is doing extremely well on that. And a liberal society, a society that speaks freely without the risk and burden of being rebutted or being abused just because you've spoken up. I think those values will have to be championed. And a society that is more open to feedback, more open to constructive and positive feedback. Sometimes we can take pot shots at people. That's okay with us. As long as we don't bloody the nose, it's okay. But I think we can take pot shots. We can have criticism. I think a society that is steeped into literature, art, and values like that will have the elasticity to take pot shots here and there. And that's the kind of democratic thought process we need to have. It's not just a format written in constitution and not just an electoral framework, but it is the mindset, a democratic mindset to provide some kind of allowance for few others and mindset. Because all of us are not same. We said that this country is quite diverse, right? When the country is not diverse, what it means is that you're going to sit next to a bunch of people who are not going to think like you because they're going to disagree with you. Not going to look like you. They look very different. They're not going to wear the dresses that you're wearing. They're not going to eat the food that you are eating. So how do I sit and eat with the people who are eating something very, very different? They could be eating egg. They could be eating vegetarian. They could be living in Northeast. Their face features could be very different. They may look dark. They may have a neon color green on their hair. They may wear 10 rings to 10 of the fingers or even 20 rings. It's okay. How do I provide elements? I think India, as a diverse country, will have to allow for these things. And that's the biggest strength a country like this can have. As I said earlier, also, the recognition that India is many Indias within one India uh, will have to translate into recognizing the diversity. And then also, our mindset will have to be so elastic to make room for differently abled people, differently thinking people, differently competent people, people who think actually very different and don't agree with us. I think diversity will have to be a business imperative again, and it is not a feel good factor. Diversity for businesses, diversity for countries, diversity. I mean, historically, there have been many stories, and I think people have lost wars because in their war room there has not been diversity. There's a famous story how United States of America has gone to war with Cuba because the generals in the team, who the 8 of them who advised the new president John F. Kennedy, who just walked in at the time, who assumed the office, they told, "Yes, Mr. President, we are ready for the war." And he asked, "Generals, are we ready for the war?" Then they said what he wanted to hear. But all the generals came from a similar background. They came from similar thinking background. They were all conformists and they all wanted to please the president. But if one of them said that we should not underestimate an opponent, irrespective of what is the background and what is the size of the opponent, then I think they would have they would have relived the art of war beautifully and they would have won that war. But that is the biggest disaster in the history of wars. Not any country has faced that United States has suffered in the hands of Cuba because of lack of diversity. Therefore, diversity is not a feel good factor. It is a business imperative. We are going to lose. It's going to be very costly if you don't acknowledge diversity.
You could also add Vietnam there.
Yes, Vietnam.
You know, I think that was also so. This sounds totally utopian, Sudhakar. I would really like to wake up to a world as utopian as this, considering the dystopia around me constantly. Now, let's talk a little bit about the healthcare chapter. You know, in a post pandemic world where the top lessons learned or probably not yet learned by the Indian healthcare system. You know, what should the government of India really focus today to be ready for any other large scale event, you know, relating to healthcare for an ordinary Indian citizen? In fact, today I was just going through the newspapers and, you know, reading up on news, and they're talking about monkeypox that's going to become like another pandemic. I don't know whether this is going to again reach the shores of India, because I mean, when we look back at the coronavirus, I mean, I still can't get over the way so many laborers were on, you know, were on foot to go back. So many bodies were unclaimed because there was fear. um, how do you think the Indian healthcare system can really catch up if there is another pandemic?
Yeah, I think uh, nations will be more secure if they behave that they're going to be at war very soon. Similarly, nations will be safer if they imagine that they're going to have an epidemic or an endemic like kind of situation. Large scale events like pandemic, like COVID that we have seen recently, we are just about 4 years out of COVID or 5 years out of COVID, not fully out of it in real sense. The shocks, the troubles and the travails of vaccination are still felt. You know, you are witnessing uh, unpredicted deaths happening amongst youngsters, most unlikely people, cardiac arrest, so on and so forth, which is loosely being indicated for the kind of vaccines, untested or partly tested kind of vaccines that we all had taken at the time. We were compelled to take. But how do we prepare for a large scale event like what we have faced? I think there are 3 points. One is that we need to invest quite a bit in public healthcare systems. We need to build the infrastructure of healthcare much more robustly, which is good now in certain pockets, and therefore your health tourism happens. I think it is good for me to write a case study on these things as an academic or as a marketing person. It's very interesting to see how health tourism happens. But it ends there, because as a nation is not going to help us in a great way. We need to have several such pockets of excellence in various parts of this large country. Our Mobility infrastructure is developing, but it has to develop much faster. Our digital infrastructure is developing, but it has to go a few notches higher. Then our healthcare infrastructure will also have to go several notches higher. With all these things expected, what is also a part of the grid is your investments. Without investments, this will not happen. I think the government will have to hugely invest in healthcare, learning from countries like UK and United States. Everywhere, if the infrastructure, again, I'm not going to go by United States or UK because they are very different in terms of the size and in terms of the diverse diversifying elements that they have within the fabric of the country. Our challenges are much more. Therefore, our preparedness for infrastructure has to be much more. Today, if I have any eventuality, if one has to go to a hospital and get the treatments done, it is easier to die than go through the treatment process. And it's very unfortunate I'm saying this thing. But accepting those pockets of excellence which are attracting medical tourism, the rest of the country is struggling. A large number of people will have to go to bigger cities and bigger towns and then go for the unaffordable healthcare treatment. I think the cost will have to come down. Investments in infrastructure will have to be larger. The government will have to work with private. The partnership between private and public and NGOs will have to be much more robustly taken up. So when we do that, I think the public healthcare infrastructure would have been built, and those systems would have responded much better for a large scale event like our COVID kind of event. Now we have seen several good schemes coming from government, several good schemes coming from certain state governments also. How do we sit together and try and nationalize the same thing? For example, what is working for a one given state? We can pick up from there, put our egos aside, and try and nationalize it in the sense that apply it to all the states, so that when I move from one state to another state, I am not cut down because I come from another state. I'm not treated in a, it's called short treated. I need to be treated at par with the others. Wherever I go, I get the same kind of education. Wherever I go, I should get the same kind of healthcare. If that is the dictum of our thinking and our policy, our governance, then I think it is called infrastructure being, equitably built. Otherwise, we are only using these jargons for equitable access of healthcare, equitable access of education. These things are not going to translate into any benefit for our society and the country. So, so we move towards making it omnipresent. With this kind of population, the number of doctors that we are producing is just not sufficient. We need to focus one on that. Number two, the number of hospitals that the government will have to invest in will have to be much, much larger. Number three, encourage and incentivize private people to set up more medical colleges. And of course, without those leakages of question papers through NEET, I think we need to plug that very, very carefully. Otherwise, we are going to produce wrong kind of doctors. We need doctors, but we don't want doctors that can inflict damage upon you. So infrastructure in terms of hospitals and institutions and research bodies for private players to get them, the 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 kind of regulations that we have to be eased. That doesn't mean we compromise on quality, but it should not be like we make them go around from pillar to post. You say single window clearance, but single window clearance is not there in reality. I think such things we should avoid. We should really mean what we say. The ease of doing businesses for everyone, including the healthcare businesses, should be really, really high. In the sense, the ease should be pretty high, and not just for the sake of ranking in the committee of nations across the world, but just for the sake of our own people. We owe it to them. We are very patriotic. We are very patriotic when we make ease of doing business a reality. Otherwise, we are not patriotic. Just by flying the tirangas and wearing badges, we don't become patriotic, right? We comply with rules and regulations. We comply with the law and order situations. We pay taxes, and we make everything equitably accessible to everyone without much of a struggle. When we do that, I think we become more patriotic, and then we would have built this country, uh, a really healthy country, so to say. A healthy country is a country that is in mind and body, which is healthy. In access to information and access to healthcare, it is easy. Therefore, in my mind, there's no burden when I'm going to go for healthcare. With an assurance that I can have this kind of a treatment and access to healthcare everywhere, my mind rests normally. that's a healthy living and healthy expectation from the government and from the society, from the country I live in. Otherwise, if I have a burden that, hey, something should not strike at me. If it does, I'm going to die rather than paying the bills. If that is the kind of mindset and thinking or the fear or burden, then I think it's not a healthy country or a healthy state of affairs that we are living in. So I might sound uh, little hard, but the reality is equally hard, and therefore we need to talk about it. Yes, it's not utopian in every sense that we've spoken in the previous two responses that I gave you, but I think here situation is pessimistic, and in the sense that it is actually not good, and therefore my commentary. But the lessons that we have learned from these leaders on my wise use conversations is that we need to invest robustly into healthcare infrastructure and encourage the private and government partnerships and incentivize more players to set up more and more theaters of treatment that we can have across tier 2, tier 3. There are several players who have done that. They have made affordable kidney treatments, that is the dialysis treatment, much affordable treatment across. They have scaled it up beautifully. One of the leaders who has appeared on my wise use sessions and the story that we have written about in the book is uh, the story of dialysis democratized at 2,500 rupees or less, and with an insurance policy attached to it. I think it is really, really affordable and accessible. It is set up in 265 towns in this country, which is uh, tantamounting to tell you that the empathy was there within that entrepreneur to actually go for it, and not just the ROI. I think, of course, with the scale now, even the returns are fantastic. But more than the returns, the benefits and the long term impact that one has put on the healthcare canvas of this country, it has improved the landscape much, much better.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that, Sudhakar, because I have done the rounds of the hospital with my father for his dialysis treatment, and I saw so many patients begging the doctors to reduce the amount in Bangalore. And some of them used to cry, and they were elderly people, and my heart just bled. And you cry from within, and you say that you wish there would be something to change the fate of so many people who travel, and they're sleeping outside the hospital because there is a patient who's inside, patients that are totally unconscious and they're rejected from the government hospitals. I just saw it all, and I think I get the goosebumps when I talk to you. I feel that healthcare should be affordable and for everyone, in our country. We must get that as you know as uh, as the basic freedom for speech. I think that should be there. In today's really strife ridden world, supply chains are driving not only availability of goods, but also pricing inflation, and the upstream manufacturing ecosystem that employs a very large number of people. Now, what, in your opinion, you consider are the emerging trends that are leading towards Industry 4.0? And how is digital revolution gaining ground at the grassroots level workers? Because digital revolution hasn't fully really touched everybody. Yes, there is UPI, which I think is fantastic, because even on a road today, I find people who are the transgender community who is begging from you. They will give you a UPI for you to give them a certain amount of money. But beyond this, there is so much more that people can embrace. The entire democratization of a digital world, where I see so many women doing businesses on from Instagram, from Facebook, and I think it is phenomenal that they have had the knowledge to go ahead and start this. So tell me a little bit about how would it really touch your and my favorite subject of the tier 2 and the tier 3 uh, part of our country.
Uh, The way I look at it is that even you have mentioned it so nicely that the digital literacy among the workers in tier 2 and tier 3 has actually gone up. The adoption of these emerging technologies is a given now. It's a reality now. It's no longer a story. It's no longer a story that is written to impress you or impact you. It's a reality, and you can go to these towns and cities, and you will be able to witness this. Mm, My 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 fundamental stay has been the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure that has been laid as a given. For example, if your internet access, your device access, and the quality of the bandwidth is assured, then it gives rise to several of these new technologies being adopted. Otherwise, it becomes a romantic story. I think slowly the infrastructure is paying off, and therefore the adoption of new emerging technologies is also happening. For example, uh, artificial intelligence is being adopted and consumed by several people across strata, across regions, across tier 2 and tier 3 as well. Number one is AI. AI is a very important thing that we cannot brush aside, and we need to completely embrace. More often we talk about generative AI, but generative AI is also extremely important for us to enhance our productivity. I think businesses, manufacturing or logistics or services, everywhere, I think productivity will be enhanced when we use these technologies for automation. So productivity tool, AI and generative AI, number one. Number two, we also need to have in manufacturing or logistics something called IoT. Internet of Things is a big thing. I mean, it's not me who is saying this. It's been there for many years. Artificial intelligence has been there for the last 30 years. But but the way it has taken us by a storm, especially in terms of chat GPT and all, enhancing the productivity, efficiencies and all, it's very good. Now, similarly, if you apply AI to any of your domains, it is going to result in your predictive analysis. For example, in a training kind of setup or an institution or a coaching center, for example, you are sitting for civil services examination. Let's take that example. The student will be taken through various kinds of trainings, basic reading, extensive reading, intensive reading, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, they'll have to practice the test. Now, if you have a database of 20 years of question papers in the last 20 years, you feed that to a system and then use predictive analytics for that based on how the student is answering some of these questions, how the level of difficulty can be taken up. You'll be training that person to be ready for a tougher question paper in the final examination. So, using predictive analytics, not just in terms of a training model where I gave you an example, but even predictive analytics in healthcare, predictive analytics in logistics, your mobility, your trucks, your supply chain, you will have to have everything integrated and you need to predict the problems or you need to predict the order placement. And I'm sure lots of people are already doing that. But Indian businesses which are of Indian origin will also have to use it more prevalently. I think they are not using it now as much as the foreign partners are using on Indian soil. Indian partners themselves are not using it. That is one distinctive feature. That's my request that everyone should get into that and embrace it more than a mere slogan. A lot of business leaders, they go to conferences and they speak about AI and its adoption. When they come back, their investments are very poor. On a horizon of 6 months from now, I think on a scale of 1 to 10, our adoption of emerging technologies, principally AI, will have to be much more than 7.5 or so. 10 is the ideal, but I think today if we are at 1 or 2, we need to move to 7.5 on a horizon of 6 months to 8 months. If we don't respond with that kind of speed, we will be left behind. I think the world will be divided into two. One is those who have adopted AI and those who have not. I think we would like to be in the first category. And we translate this productivity enhancement into better service, better results, and better efficiency at lesser cost. Obviously, the cost will go up, cost will go down when we have increased productivity. You can apply it to any system, you can apply it to any service or product or experience that you are working out for your customers. I think you can beautifully use this technology. Train it properly, it will actually benefit you back. So that is one. IoT, as I mentioned, Internet of Things. I'll give you one example, common man's examples. For example, you have an IoT device placed in your, suppose you have 3 rooms in your home, one for you and your spouse, one for a daughter and one for a son. I'm just taking a normal template. If you want to know in their respective bathrooms how much of water they spend every single day or per month, you can have a device that can measure the usage of water either through uh, tap water or through flush. You can have a small meter and measure it and collate the information among the 3 rooms and then calculate for your month. Then you will understand how much is the per room consumption and how we can reduce the per room consumption. Not just the power, not just the electricity, not just the water, but I think even air conditioners. I think the responsibility on carbon footprint is individual now. We cannot say that as a house, we are doing, who is doing what, we don't know. I think we can reduce it to and track it to an individual level as well, and bring in that kind of sense of responsibility as well. So if it works at home, it can work in office as well. If it works in office, it can work in the society. The sense of accountability will be much more if IoT is used positively and in a manner that I was trying to give an example about. So AI, IoT, blockchain. Blockchain is beautifully used in your supply chain, in education institutions when you have your certificates being verified and accessed by various people like recruiters and job givers, and even matrimonial sites. If they want to access, they should be able to access if all of them are part of a verified network called blockchain. Then we can always do this in a setting which is typical to, say, a tea manufacturer or a tea brand. One of them have spoken here. If they are all on the value chain called blockchain, from the time they purchase from the tea garden to the restaurant or the tea shop where the tea is served, if the entire value chain is monitored, then you will actually avoid costs, you will actually avoid delays, and you will also have what is called uh, the benefit passed on to the end customer. So everyone gets benefited in the whole thing. We are unnecessarily losing time and energy and effort when you're not using this emerging technology. So let's use blockchain on systems which are large, supply chains that are widespread, for authentication, for saving costs, and also for focusing on better things. When you have streamlined one particular area of your business, you can actually focus on other things. Let them focus on building brands in a different way. Let them take care of the backbone properly and then focus on a few other things as well. Likewise, they'll get enough reserved time to meaningfully utilize for better part of their life. And
No way out, Sudhakar. They
sorry,
will, there will be no way out. They have to adopt. I
they
mean,
have
even
to
if
adopt.
they are going to be very stubborn about it, it's like saying that, many, many years back, I remember when, we had computers, they said, oh, your life will be completely, ruined now. And look at us today, we can't even imagine our life without, sending emails. Gone are those days when did a telegram or you did, and so it's, I mean, you either you adopt or you
Perish.
don't go out, you perish. You adopt or you perish. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit, Sudhakar, about personal branding, which
Oh
is
God.
which everybody wants. And how is it that they can really meaningfully communicate credibility? So most people tend to forget that when you do personal branding, you have to be credible to take your message forward, and the clarity that they need to have while building the personal branding framework. So tell me a little bit about how do you think professionals can do this?
Okay, my own framework for personal branding is the following. Uh, Personal branding is an opportunity for you to be discovered in a desired manner by the outside world. The world outside you is your cabin. For example, if you're working in a cabin in your office, the one who is sitting outside of your cabin is the world. So what is the manner in which you would like to be discovered by various people? I would like to be known by this. I would like to be known as someone. All that summates into what is called being discovered in a desirable manner. So that's the definition part of it in a textbook language. The second thing is that people always think that even not just personal branding, but branding itself, people think that if you spend millions of dollars in advertising or what is called talking or telling the world that you are such a great product, such a great organization, such a great human being, then they think that it amounts to building a personal brand or a well branded organization. It's not. My framework is like this: being is the first step, behaving is the next step, and then broadcasting is the third step. So you be a particular personality or an organization that you would like to be. Be there, acquire your skills, competencies, infrastructure, so on and so forth, and try to be there. Be Ram before saying that you are a Ram. And second one is behave like a Ram. There are characteristic features in which one has to behave like a Ram. Being a Ram and knowing only to yourself is not enough. You have to behave it in your day-to-day action. Your behavior has to be seen. Supposing I look at you 10 times on social media, your behavior is known by the kind of likes or dislikes, the comments that you make, and what are the things that you like. If I track 10 of it, 100 of it, I can put together a personality of you. In real life also, who are the people that you wave at? Who are the people that you smile at? What are the restaurants that you sit down? What is your world views? In every of these touch points, you are letting a little part of yourself known to others. So that is called behavior. When nobody is watching, how do you behave? That is also behavior. So if you translate being Ram into behaving like Ram, that's the second and most important aspect. And the third and the most important aspect is tell the world that you are the Ram. Then they will believe you. But if you start with the third one of broadcasting that I am the Ram, I am the Sham, and I am the Gopi, I am the Krishna, it will not work. It will actually fall flat. It will be counterproductive. This is the simplest framework in my workshops of personal branding I use. And I tell them a story which I'll tell you now. You'll have to give me a little more time to tell that. But I'll tell you very quickly. I'm taking these Ram Sham names because these are general names. Nobody should get affected by these parlances. Ram is a guy who lives in our apartment and he takes his dog for a walk every morning at 5 a.m. And ours is a colony where a lot of people come this side and a few go that side and they come across. This is true in real life and social media as well. The moment you say hi to the other person, if Ram says hi to the other person will say hi. And next day also the person will say hi. And if one day Ram misses a walk, the other person says, why were you not there yesterday? Similar behavior happens even on social media. So just to keep things clear, I mentioned this. So Ram is going for a walk with his dog, and the dog is walking day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. So on day 6, he thinks that he's not just having a dog, but he's having a lion. He wants everyone to say that Ram has got a lion and he's walking with a lion. That's the desire. He wants to be discovered in that desirable manner, right? I'm using my template. So he says, he goes to a location called Amirpet in Hyderabad, for example, if it is Hyderabad, so, or your Ulhasnagar in Maharashtra, okay, where everything else is available. So he purchases a wig for lion and he puts it on the dog. And on day 6, he walks with the dog as if he's walking with a lion. And he wants the previous members, those who wished hello to him every morning, to say that Ram is walking with a lion. But they're not saying it. But Ram wants to show everyone that, hey, this is a lion that I'm walking with the wig. There's a big wig that's available like a lion, it looks. Day 1, day 2, or day 7, day 8, it happened. On day 9, there's another dog which barked at this dog. And meekishly, this Ram's dog is hid under the car or behind a tree and didn't come out until 10 minutes of, shooing away the other dogs, the street dogs. You're actually not behaving like one. You are a lion thrust upon you, but you're not behaving like a lion. How does a lion behave? Lion would pounce at the dog, the street dogs, and say that I'm courageous. You want to take panga with me? Come on, bring it on me. That's a lion. But the dog has seen through this dog, which is wearing a mask or wearing a wig, and it tried barking it. In fact, I'm going to tell you that even against a real lion, the street dogs are going to bark and they want to take their chance. But what would a real lion do in such a circumstance, such an event? The real lion probably, I'll tell you when Sham's story comes. So cut there. There's a Sham in the same apartment who is walking with his dog in the morning saying hi to everyone. He goes back on day 3 and says, I need to train my dog beautifully. I want to make it very strong. It has to jump the fences. It has to jump a particular height. I give a lot of proteins. I give a lot of vaccination. I take care of its hygiene. It has to be healthy. It has to think properly. It has to not just protect me. It has to protect a few others also. It has to walk very nicely, confidently. So he takes on day 7, day 8, day 10, day 15, or day 20. It is walking nicely, and there is a street dog that is barking at Sham's dog. Sham's dog walks unmindful of the barkings, not recognizing any of these street dogs. It walks, walks, walks. Day 21, there are 4 dogs that come to attack Sham's dog. Sham's dog decides now to pounce at the fourth dog. It lunges forward, and then one lunge, all the four dogs run away, and then it comes back to its path and walks unmindful of any other disturbance. And from next day onwards, there are no dogs that are barking at Shyam's dog. So all the people who are waving at Shyam say that, hey, Shyam has got a dog which is actually walking like a lion. It behaves like a lion. And therefore, she says Shyam's dog is a lion, whereas Ram has got a lion looking dog, but is actually a tame and a weak and a meekish dog. This is personal branding, my friend.
Love it. Sudhakar. Oh God, I had to control myself. Oh, fantastic. This was a great, great example about how you need to be authentic for what you want to say, is what Sudhakar is trying to tell us.
Mama, you will
Let-
remember this, right? You will remember
I
this.
I will remember this forever.
Please use it without giving any credit to me. You can use it in all your
I'm
sessions.
going to give credit to you before for my next, if I go in somewhere as a speaker. So let's talk a little bit about the homegrown brands that are spreading their national and global wings with a lot of very unique experience that help them chart their journey. So case in point is Cycle Agarbatti, Paradise Biryani, Tanishq, Titan, and Natural Salon, all of which are household names today. And what are the common facets in these businesses that help them go national and even global with their brands?
Very quickly, there are lessons here as well. Some of your traditional brands or heritage brands have dug deeper and well entrenched themselves in what is called cultural fabric of this country. I think they are putting on their shoulders the culture of the country, culture of the region, and they resonate very well with the culture. So they don't deviate from the culture of this country while keeping that as a backbone, as a mainstay in whatever they do. They're able to communicate to the new segments that are emerging in our society. Culture and values are intact, but appeal is to different segments that are emerging in the country, to youngsters, to people who are double income, no kids, for example. It's a micro segment, right? People who are divorcees, people who have been afflicted by certain injuries or certain undesirable incidents in their life. Various micro, see, the whole pleasure of business is to recognize these micro segments in this country. But how do you put everything together? By playing on the bigger thing called culture. You will connect with everyone. So 30% is appealing to your micro segment. 70% is staying strong footed, sure footed on your cultural landscape. I think that's what Tanishq has done. That's what Paradise Biryani has done. Natural Salons have done. The way Natural Salons is done by my friend entrepreneur from Chennai. If you go to the cultural template that they have instilled in their service systems of booking a reservation, a slot, then working on it and calling back. A lot of people have certain templates on doing it. But the way Naturals does is not to ingrain anything Western, but use more of Indian, use more of local. They would behave slightly different in Chennai as much as they would in, say, Hyderabad or, say, in Delhi. I think they give a lot of value for women entrepreneurs and treat women as multitaskers and put their name first. They have championed this, they have moved forward. The person who runs this and the owner is the lady herself. And when it comes to media bites and all these things, it's not just her husband who's there. I think the lady is there who is fielding the questions. Similarly, the pipe of leadership is built. As I talked about the culture some time back, the culture of women leadership is built carefully. It is part of our Indian culture. They take care of home, they take care of hearth, they take care of business as well. Gone are the days where people are, divided into hunters and gatherers, and then someone who does some kind of chores at home. No, I think women are entering into various bastions previously untested and tried and doing extremely well. And therefore, the laws also is telling us that we need to have more women on our boards, decision making. Today, Mr. Maheshwar Peri was writing an article the other day, and I was going through it, and so beautiful. What it talks about is The incidents that are happening, a rape every day or 24 hours or 18 hours, is so sad. After so much of development that we talked about, so many systems that we have built, such a nice country that we have, we are an example to others. But the infliction of wounds on our women is not stopping. Are women enjoying those powerful positions, it at work, at business, in politics? What is the percentage of women? That's what Mr. Manish Perry talked about. That probably is one long-term solution that we need to work on. We need to encourage more and more. It is Indian in psyche, I'm telling you. It may not work in a country like Bangladesh, or it may not work in United States, but it will definitely work in India. I think the policy making bodies have to be womanized. And I say this with a lesson from our epics. Policy making bodies have to be womanized. Policy making or decision making executive bodies will have to be more women, and so that they have a well-rounded perspective, and then they can take decisions if needed, if they are generally going against. It will not go. The moment you have powerful people in powerful positions as women, automatically it will take care. So coming back to this point of culture, yes, it is deeply ingrained that women are portrayed in our history, cultural history, as those who are very strong. They play several roles. They are very good at multitasking. Very good at multitasking. I say this from what I observe from my sisters who are working, my spouse who is working, my kids who are going to work. I have two daughters. They're going to go and work. They are very good at multitasking. An average man is not so good at multitasking as much as an average woman, irrespective of your knowledge, irrespective of a domain of work or skill. Anything that you take, an average woman ranks higher compared to an average man. Having said that, our natural saloon to Paradise Biryani to Tanishq to Nilofer Chai, it's a heritage brand in Hyderabad. These people stay rooted in the cultural history of the country and the region that they belong to, and therefore they're making it work. So many lessons. I mean, when I get a fresh infusion of a learning from a given brand or a leader that we are talking to, my evenings go much better. I walk lighter, probably a few inches above the ground sometimes, because that's the levitation your knowledge gives you. That's the kick of adrenaline that gets into your mind when you learn from these leaders, and that's what we try to, in our own humble way, put it properly in the book which you read and you're asking some questions on.
Amazing, amazing. Absolutely. I do agree with you that women are multitaskers, and it's irrespective of how educated they are. I mean, I've seen my grandmother, my house help to anyone, they will do everything all together. And with one hand, they'll be holding the ladle, and with the other hand, they'll be holding their child. So that's exactly how it is. So let's just talk a little bit about education in Indian societal structure that remains in the critical path for professional success. So, how is online education on both test prep, which is career launcher, and professional certificate courses coming up? And what should students keep in mind, while deciding on their career paths? Because, many students actually don't have the guidance at home. Many students are guided by a whole bunch of other friends who may not be able to really tell them what is it that they need to do. So, it will be wonderful, for my listeners to hear from you. What would be your suggestions?
Yeah, online education is a tool to amplify your access to quality education, which is available across the world. And I'm sure, once again, the digital infrastructure will help you in accessing this. But I think there are four important aspects. When COVID hit, a lot of us were compelled to go for online education, and over a period of time, there are lessons. Because in the hinterlands, we need to worry about four aspects. One is the availability of power, electricity. If power is there, you can access Wi-Fi or internet bandwidth. Then you need to talk about bandwidth itself. How good is the bandwidth? The moment I log in and I put my face on a video, then it goes off. It doesn't work for us. In some of the biggest cities like Bangalore or Hyderabad, if you can have a seamless video conference like the way you and I are doing, it's great. I think this should become a norm. This should become a hassle-free thing for us. So bandwidth, quality of bandwidth per se, is the parameter that we need to look at. Third and the most important thing is the device. What kind of devices are available for me or for any student to access this amazing portals of education that are available everywhere. So electricity, internet bandwidth, third one, and the fourth one is the choice of device or the availability of device. I think these four important aspects define a large part of success in the hinterland for India for online education. That is one. I'm assuming that all these things are there. Now we move to the lesson that we learned during COVID is that in the school education, it doesn't work so well in terms of um, impact, in terms of learning value, in terms of building camaraderie, bonding, so on and so forth. It has to be hybrid. Everyone knows that. But what is the percentage of hybrid and what is the percentage of, when I say hybrid, what is the percentage of online? What is the percentage of offline? That defines the school. I think we need to have increasingly more offline and less online as far as school is concerned. For professional education and continuing education in the adult space, we need to have more online or 100% online will work beautifully. That's our experience. Our learning in the test prep area is that use more online, give gamification as part of it, create an experience like a real world coaching center or an institution that is training you. If you don't use I'll give one example. These are examples which I have tried, so I'm giving this example. You want to attract the digital natives to your university. Yours is an education institution. Before they join your institution, they should have a slice of it. They should have a taste of it, right? How can you do? You can do in many ways. One of them is to send them videos about great infrastructure you have, but still that is still virtual. Virtual is where your digital touches your emotion. It doesn't work otherwise. How can you part play by bringing them closer to institution? You can do competitions. When I say gamification, this is what I meant. You can do competitions like treasure hunt, where the registration and participation and drive for access to a lot of people to participate in a treasure hunt could be digital and online. Then you can have two parts to qualify someone into the treasure hunt. Put an online treasure hunt. Go through my website, all my facilities, and I can leave a lot of chits or some kind of clues everywhere. I'll ensure that the student has gone through all my facilities, and then at the end of it, he answers a few questions. Then you qualify them in the preliminary round, and then take them physically to your campus, make them go through a similar, because not all of them can do it, right? Say out of 1,000 people, maybe you can select about 100 of them. 100 of them will go to your campus in a given location on a predetermined day. Then they play treasure hunt in reality, and then they go and put it back on your website. Bring them back onto your website. Okay, so this is a beautiful interplay of online and offline in a gamification mode. You can attract some prospective students towards your brand and make them live through a few pieces of it in a very, very meaningful. For example, you take them to my digital library and ask them to open a particular book that you want them to open. They'll definitely open it. And you ask them a piece of question on page number 40. It will be done. Or you want them physically to go through your computer center or your studio and then ask them, is the green mat green? They'll get confused. They don't remember sometimes. Or the youngsters may not know. Some of the smarties will say, obviously the green mat has to be
It's going to be green.
green, right? So was there a red carpet when you entered the campus? Oh my God, I didn't see any red carpet. So they go back and see that. Was the flashlight still on beyond 6 p.m. In my campus? Yes, the flashlight was on. When I left the campus, it was still on. You can ask some trivia questions. You can relate it to the city that you reside in. Make this gamification a wonderful experience so that they take a part of the brand with them when they exit the game. And then beautifully you can use it. So what I'm trying to tell you is that online can be wonderful if creativity comes in. You need to live your brand. The people who are handling online communications of a particular institution or any particular brand will have to live through it. They have to make it in their head. It has to settle properly. Then you can give that beautiful experience to your prospective customers. And then if your teaching is so good, for example, entrepreneurship you want to teach online, you need to create teams. You need to create them what is called practicum. A practicum is something which you actually practice. Entrepreneurship cannot be taught in any other way. You have to practice it. You need to generate your idea, you need to take it to testing, you need to say that you have a solution, you need to form a company, register it, have your partners, do everything, and then sell it also, and then fail, and then come back. That is the practicum. If you can have all these modules allowed in your learning management system of your school, which is online, school in the sense business school, which is online, then you're doing very well. The adult education for the adults is really meaningful and will work. So I mean to say that online education as a tool is not enough. Online education as a tool plus your creativity to use it, your experiential part of it being brought in creatively, then things will work. But less online in school level, more online at a college and university level will do wonders for us. I think a lot of practicing managers, like all of us, you and me, will also have to go back to school and keep learning, right? I think online education helps us in pursuing with that lifelong learning ambition, and it is fueling knowledge and inspiration for several, as we see day in and day out. There are several players who are providing that, but institutions that have well-meant activities with gamification, with interest sought in, interest sustained, and interest translated into a great experience, then I think they will be successful. We should know how to use online.
So lastly, Sudhakar, you know what? There is this whole risk of creating ESG crisis, economic, social, and governance. So do you see enough thought going into this from the government and the corporate sectors? And what are the real risks that people seem to be unaware about? Cost, does it carry over long term? And mitigation steps that should be taken to manage the same. So tell us a little bit about, all of these things. The ESG crisis.
Correct. ESG is still at a nascent stage as far as many of the corporate leaders are concerned. Very recently that we are talking about this. See, it has taken ages for us to talk about DEI, uh, diversity, equity, and inclusiveness.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
this will also take much more time. But we've just had one conversation with a leader who said that humans can never win World War Zero. World War Zero uh, is tangentially talking about the net zero emissions commitment that we have for ourselves. That war, the humans will never win because it is not a wholesome priority. I think uh, third world is victimized. Third world is trying to blame the first world because of the phase difference, and there's several blame games that are going on. In reality, I think across the corporates and in real life also, if ESG is a concern, it has to become part of your organizational strategy. Don't take it as a new found jargon. Take it as on the top as a CEO's priority, as a CEO's important piece of strategy. Then it will work. There are several countries that when I travel to UK, I've seen institutions where dedicated research is happening on net zero emissions and how do we cut down by inventing new materials, and it is working in unison with the commitment goals displayed by, say, UK. So UK as a government is investing into their labs, and all of them are working on developing new materials and new products so that the emissions are lower and lower. Now that is at one level. At the other level, the corporate leaders have many distractions. They have to focus on the regular ROI. They have to focus on the fact that they need to meet the bottom line carefully. They need to read these things, not moving from black to red. I think still we have our priorities there. We are stuck up there. How do we move from environment as a priority, how sustainability becomes a priority, how governance becomes a priority for us? In governance, you have many policy guidelines that are given: governance, equitable governance, governance that is free and fair, governance that does not take into that takes into cognizance the pitfalls of partiality, the pitfalls of internal trading, so on and so forth. I think governance is a bigger issue, but there are several organizations which still manage that without rising above board. There's the art of managing your board is still visible for us, which means they are not towing the line of the policy, which is actually not democratic. Still, there are many organizations that do. I think increasingly it will hit our minds and it will hit our practices thereafter, but it will take some time. ESG is a reality. ESG will have to be taken up as a CEO's priority. And I think even the investors and the board members will have to talk about the triple bottom lines, the ESG as a triple bottom line that we need to worry about, rather than the traditional bottom lines that we always talk about. The LHS is equal to RHS, and the the balance sheets and the P&L that we look at. I think beyond that, we should focus on ESGs. I think it is on a different axis altogether. One is on the functional productivity kind of a level. The other one is on the value side. The impact and the values that we leave behind for the corporate history of this country. So thereby, of course, uh, on the society, it will have a larger impact. We have been doing, for example, you studied in a government institution, you would like to give it back to the country, right? There are certain values within you. Doesn't mean that someone who studies in a private institute will not have those values. They will also have. That is, you have taken birth on this earth. So, what would you like to give it back? What would you want your kids to inherit? I think there are certain values of sustainability that we need to work on, certain values of equitability, equality, governance, all these issues, they converge into the newfound corporate priority of CEOs, that is ESG. I think we need to work a long way to go.
Thank you, Sudhakar, for being on today's episode, and we wish you lots and lots of luck. And when I meet you in person, I need to know what is it that you drink to do all of this all together, and whether it is your morning coffee or whether there's a special drink that to wear all these hats of being a brand strategist, author, startup mentor, and with so much of
I'll tell you
confidence.
now itself. I do cycling. I do cycling 3 times a week, and every ride is 50 kilometers outdoor cycling. I do. When I cycle, I align my thoughts properly. My days and weeks are made and planned in my mind carefully. I come back to office and write down. I write down. I don't type in, and I try to be consistent. I try and work out these ideas, not just working in my mind, but it should be working out on paper and in reality as well. We are trying to be there. A long way to go again. Even at an individual level, a long way to go.
So, for all our listeners, cycling is the answer. And thank you, Sudhakar, for being on today's episode.
Thank you so much for your patience.
Catch the amazing business leaders and authors who will be speaking at the Bangalore BizLit Fest 2024 at the Catholic Club on 14th September. You can register by 10 a.m. to be part of the specially curated Bangalore BizLit Fest 2024.